Hey guys, this is Austin, and today I'm here with a comparison between the Nikon D3200 versus the D3100. As a D3100 user for the last year and a half, I can definitely say there are some very nice improvements in the D3200, but are they worth the roughly $150 price premium? To start out with, let's take a look at the camera bodies. At first glance they look identical, but Nikon has tweaked every surface and button on the D3200. Some changes are subtle, like the new flowing line that runs from left to right along the flash. Others are a bit more substantial, like the new grip which gives you a better hold on the camera, something very important in a small DSLR like this. Around back, you'll see the live view switch on the D3100 has been removed in exchange for a button, and the video record button has been moved up top below the shutter button. The live view button is just fine, but I did have an issue with the record button. It's the same size and in the same spot as the info and aperture/exposure buttons, and even after a few days of using the camera, I still accidentally hit the wrong button all the time. The D3100 is built surprisingly well for an entry-level DSLR, and the D3200 is no exception. One minor annoyance on the D3100 is the absurdly loud SD card door. Seriously, do you hear that? Thankfully, the D3200 has no such problems. As far as ports, they both have HDMI out and a proprietary Nikon port for GPS. On the D3200, however, you can buy an adapter to give your camera Wi-Fi to transfer over pictures and control the camera from your smartphone. The D3100 also has mini USB as well as AV out, where the D3200 has a combo USB and AV out port along with a 3.5mm microphone jack. The screen on the D3100 was always a weak point. With a low resolution of only 230,000 dots, it was one of the few major areas where the low price stuck out. With the D3200, however, there's a new 921,000 dot display, which is much better and matches several of the high-end Nikon DSLRs. Neither screen works particularly well in direct sunlight, but both are easily readable in the vast majority of situations. Now let's take a look at image quality. The D3100 sports a 14-megapixel APS-C sized sensor, where the D3200 swaps that for a 24-megapixel sensor. The difference in detail is very noticeable, especially when you zoom in. Having 24 megapixels is also great for cropping. This is a shot I took with the D3200 with a 50mm lens, and there's enough megapixels to see detail even with extreme cropping. Beyond the increased megapixel count, you won't see a great deal of difference in the D3100 and D3200. Both are very capable shooters that will give you some very nice looking files in both JPEG and RAW. The D3100 has a decent burst rate of 3 frames per second, but the D3200 has a considerably better 4 frames. Of course, when you add more megapixels to a sensor, oftentimes you lose low light performance, but the D3200 does a good job here. At the same settings, the D3200 brings in a slightly more bright and colorful image, and handles noise just as well, if not very slightly better. Files stay clean on both cameras up to ISO 400, and are still usable for most situations up to ISO 1600. At this point, up close there is definitely visible noise, but colors remain true and detail is still there. At ISO 3200, things still aren't terrible, but noise becomes very noticeable. 6400 is really only usable for web use, and 12800 is pretty rough. Both cameras sport the same 11-point autofocus system. In good lighting it works fairly quickly and locks on well. In low light it's a bit hit or miss. Sometimes it can grab a hold and keep an object in focus, but more often than not you're going to need to rely on manual focus. They share the same optical viewfinder, which isn't quite full coverage and is a bit small, but unless you're coming from the D800 you probably won't notice. Where the D3200 really shines is in video mode. It now supports 1080p video at 30 frames per second, as well as 720p at 60 frames. The maximum recording time is also up to 20 minutes on the D3200, compared to 10 minutes on its predecessor. The added resolution on the screen definitely makes shooting in live view easier, and having a microphone input is a huge help. You also have manual audio adjustments, as well as having your audio levels displayed on screen. Alright, so I'm now recording using the Nikon D3200, and to help me demo the video mode, I have my good friend Zam. So my setup here is that the D3200 just sitting on a tripod, as I kind of try to follow this dog around. I am using a 50mm 1.8G lens, and on top of that I am using the standard audio from the microphone built into the camera. So some of the cool features on the D3200 is that you can adjust all your settings while recording. So for example, I'm at 160th shutter speed right now. I'll go to 180, 100, 125. You can see it gets a little dark, so if I want to adjust my ISO, I can go to 400, I can go to 800, and then let's see, we want to bump the shutter speed a little higher. So you can do all of that, and of course, since this is a DSLR, we can kind of manually focus, so if you want to do like a little rack focus here, bam, there's the dog fully in focus. About the only thing you can't adjust while in video mode is your aperture, so if I want, right now I'm at f1.8, if I wanted to change it, I would have to stop recording, leave live views, and adjust the aperture and go back into live view. However, beyond that, you have pretty much all the manual control you could want. Alright, so I'm now using the D3100. So everything else is the exact same. I'm using the same lens, the same lighting, and it's in pretty much the same spot. So probably the biggest difference is that I have no real manual control. About the best I can do is I can lock the exposure and I can adjust everything around and it won't change the exposure on me. But beyond that, it's pretty much automatic only. Probably only the other thing I can do is just the exact same way as I did with the D3200. You can leave live view, stop recording, adjust your aperture, and go back in. It will respect that, but beyond that, everything else is pretty much all automatic. With Nikon keeping the D3100 around below the D3200 and D5100, it remains a stellar camera for $550. In most cases, 14 megapixels are going to be just fine, and while the better screen on the D3200 is nice, it's not really worth an extra $150. If you have a D3100, don't worry, your camera is not just suddenly out of date. On the other hand, if you're seriously interested in video, the D3200 is absolutely worth it. Nikon has been quite far behind Canon as far as video goes, however the D3200 has made some huge gains here. Combined with the impressive megapixel count and better display, the D3200 makes an excellent first DSLR. If you want to see more videos on the Nikon D3200, be sure to check out my unboxing as well as the full review. If you enjoyed, definitely be sure to leave this video a thumbs up, and if you're interested in more videos like this, be sure to subscribe.